Hello everyone, David here, and welcome to my video for the top 10 movies of 2014. Yes, it's been quite some time since I've done this. In fact, I've been lagging on it for a number of years now, but finally I am back. I've gotten my thoughts together and I'm now going to compile my top 10 movies, my favorite 10 movies of the year of our Lord 2014. Now I know a bunch of movie reviewers have already done their top 10 list for both best and worst movies of the year, but I felt like the first video of the new year should be the one to reminisce about the really amazing experiences we had in the cinema in the past year. So I felt like this was the most appropriate video to post as my first video for 2015. Now, a couple of things to disclaim before I get started on my list. Just like every other person who has done a top 10 list of 2014, this is my personal list. So if there's a movie that didn't make it onto the list, it's because I simply just didn't think of it as one of the best of the year. As critically acclaimed as it is by many other people, I just didn't find it. Let me set this down to the side because it's getting kind of irritating. But yeah, I just didn't find it to be that captivating enough to be on my top 10 list. Now, later on in the video, I will do an honorable mentions of certain movies that I felt were rather great and one of the best of the year, but didn't just quite make the cut. And the other thing that I want to disclaim as to certain omissions from my list of other movies that people put in their list is because I'm not an official movie reviewer, alright? I'm not part of the press. I don't get these private screenings. I don't get these special releases or screeners that other people get. I'm not a licensed movie reviewer. Every movie that I have reviewed this year or seen this year, I either paid with my own money to go see in the theater, or later on I rented it or streamed it in some kind of way to be able to watch it and bring you guys this top 10 list. And because of that, actually a number of my entries in this list are actually movies that I have already reviewed. So those I'm going to briefly talk about and explain why they're on the list, and then I'm going to move on. And if you guys want to know my full in-depth details as to why I like those movies, then just check out my reviews. And since I'm not a licensed reviewer, some of these movies that I've been dying to see didn't come to a theater near me. I would have to travel between an hour to an hour and a half close to the Los Angeles area to be able to check out some of these movies, and I'm not going to do that. Okay, so it's sad to see that some of the movies that everybody's talking about are not going to make it onto my list, like Whiplash, The Imitation Game, Foxcatcher, and all these other movies that are being released right now on a limited release to be able to qualify for the Oscar season, but then they're not going to get released nationwide until this month, January, which is really irritating. So that explains why certain movies didn't make my cut, because I simply just did not see everything. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Breaking in at number 10, and very late in the year because I just recently watched this, is Chef, which is the movie written, directed, and starring Jon Favreau, along with an all-star cast led by Sofia Vergara, John Leguizamo, Scarlett Johansson, Oliver Platt, Bob Cannavale, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, Dustin Hoffman, and Robert Downey Jr. And this is a movie that made me realize that there's actually a subgenre to comedy, and that is feel-good comedy. A comedy that is supposed to make you feel good by the time the end credits roll, despite how fairy tale-ish it ends, which is my only complaint about the movie, is that maybe it ends with a nice little bow on top, and you know, sometimes life doesn't work that way. Nevertheless though, the movie's packed with great performances, even by this kid right here. You see this kid right here? He was amazing, and he's just a kid, and it's very hard for me to like a kid, because you know, I don't like kids, let alone kids in movies. But this little kid nailed it, because he was not, most importantly, he was not annoying, and he was a very fundamental character to the story, and everybody gives great performances. Jon Favreau carries the movie, not only with the writing and the directing, but also as the lead role. John Leguizamo's great, Sofia Vergara's great, everybody's great, even the people that only have small cameos in the movie, like Dustin Hoffman and Robert Downey Jr. And I'm going to echo everything else that other people have said. Do not watch this movie on an empty stomach, because you are going to feel hungry. I even just recently had eaten at the time that I started watching this movie, and I started salivating at the mouth, because it's food porn. But it's done in a way where it just makes you want to cook, and I don't even like to cook. but it's definitely a movie to make you feel good, even if life isn't as happy as this movie ends with. It's the kind of movie that you look at, you laugh, you feel for the characters. Every character is really interesting. The story is very uplifting, and it's definitely one of the movies that you definitely need to check out if you're in the need of a really feel good type of film. Number 9 is for a movie that I'm actually a little bit surprised is getting an awful lot of Oscar buzz this season, considering how early this movie was released. I believe it came out back in February. But you know, them critics and the Academy, they are suckers for Wes Anderson, which explains why the Grand Budapest Hotel is not only being critically praised and talked about during this Oscar season, but it also ends up on my top 10 list, because after walking out of it, I said to myself, if nothing better comes out that manages to bump Grand Budapest Hotel out of my list, it's definitely going to make it into my top 10 list. It's very darkly comedic, great performances. A lot of performances are from people that are going against type, especially Ralph Fiennes as the lead character, Monsieur Gustav, I can't remember 100% his name, but, you know, Ralph Fiennes or Ray Fiennes, I've heard that name being pronounced in different ways, but he's usually played more dramatic characters, very heavy characters. I mean, he's known as the Dark Lord Voldemort, for crying out loud. So it's interesting to see that he takes on a much more flamboyant comedic role, but he nails it. And even the actor that we get introduced to in this movie, I believe his name is Tony Revolori, who plays Zero, who's actually the main actual character that's telling the story. He was also great in quite a bit of a breakout role. And Wes Anderson, sure, he's using his same technique of shooting everything in the center and also changing the aspect ratio to kind of tell you what the time period is, but he uses it very effectively, and the cinematography is very colorful and saturated, but it matches the tone and the consistency of the movie. And I can go into all these different artsy type of terminology to be able to describe why I love this movie so much, but it's definitely one of the finer movies of this year. Alright, here we go for number 8, the first major blockbuster on my list, and the first movie that I actually already reviewed. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I heard from various people about a couple of weeks before its release saying that this is actually one of the finer sequels to come out in recent memory, and they are right. Sure, certain elements in the story are a little bit familiar, mainly from The Lion King, if you know what I'm talking about, but the character, especially Caesar being brought to life by Andy Serkis' performance, and even some of the other motion capture characters, like I believe his name is Toby Kebbell as Koba, and even some of the human characters, bring it all together to really deliver a monumental step in what's going to become the legacy, Caesar's legacy, and developing the Planet of the Apes. And if you guys want to know more detail as to why I really like this movie, then check out my review. I'll put an annotation here somewhere on the screen. But I still can't get over the fact that they named the sequel Dawn, and yet the prequel or the reboot Rise. Dawn comes before the Rise. It doesn't make sense. Keeping on with the blockbusters, number 7, X-Men Days of Future Past. Without trying to spoil the movie for those who have not seen it, let's just say that it does something that automatically makes this movie go in my top 10. Not only because it's X-Men, it's a superhero movie, Bryan Singer's returning, the cast of not only the original X-Men, but also the new First Class cast is coming back with Jennifer Lawrence, Michael Fassbender. He's not in this picture for some reason, but James McAvoy. And like I said, the returning characters with the connection that is Logan, played by Hugh Jackman, everybody giving great performances, and visual effects are astonishing, as well as just how comic booky the story is. But when I say comic booky, I use it in the most flattering way possible, because there's two ways to use that phrase. You know, it could be either in a bad way, where it fit more the comic book or the cartoon, but can't be translated into a movie. And here, it feels like the writers and the director were very faithful to what made those comics very fascinating, to what made X-Men very fascinating, back to the mythology of the mutants and the social implications of it, of how it's very political based, and how, you know, mutants are wrong and all that kind of stuff. I love that, and I love how they brought that back in X-Men Days of Future Past, along with that ending that really made this movie definitely one of the finer, not only one of the finer X-Men films in the franchise, but definitely one of the better movies of this year. And if you guys want to know more about my opinions, check out my review on my channel. Coming in at number 6 is a movie that I literally watched the night before I'm filming this video. I literally watched this movie last night, and thank God I did. It was the movie that I looked at and said, this is it. After this movie, I'm closing in all entries for my top 10 because I've heard nothing but great things about this movie, not only being one of the best sequels made in recent years, but one of the best action movies in recent years. And I rightfully agree. The Raid 2. I am so irritated that I did not watch this in the theater because I know for a fact this actually did come to my local theater, but for some stupid reason. It came out, I think, in either April or May, around the summertime, and I just missed it because I was so caught up with Captain America, because that came out around that time, and then in May we had all the blockbusters, and I somehow skipped out on The Raid 2, knowing that it was in my local theater, but I didn't watch it, especially after having actually seen the first movie. I did watch the first movie, so I'm really frustrated with myself that I didn't manage to catch it in time to really make it to really resonate with the film and really absorb it, because I'm a little there's a part of me that's a little frustrated knowing that I'm putting this on my top 10, let alone at what is it, number 6? It's on my number 6 spot, and I just barely watched it last night. But it does things that action movies just fail to do these days, which is to deliver action that is not, I don't think there's even an explosion in this movie. There's a couple of gunshots, mainly towards the end, but there's no explosions. There's a couple of car chases, but they're done in a way where you don't have a bunch of cars flipping in a much more unrealistic fashion. In fact, there's a shot where a car simply crashes into this booth and it topples over on its side. And for certain people today that love like Michael Bay movies, they're gonna look at that and be like, "Oh, that was weak." But to me, I'm like, that's realistic, okay? Get your life together. And this is essentially what this movie did. Delivered amazing action sequences with such amazing choreography and camera work. Like, some of the camera work in this movie, I look at it and I go, how the hell did you get the camera to move that way? And even when there's no action going on, there's certain shots that look beautiful. They just look amazing. Like, they're able to capture landscapes and certain shots that are that I'm like, how did you got a crane to get the camera all the way up there? But more importantly, they fleshed out a story that they could have easily just half-assed it. They could have just said, oh yeah, we just need a sequel because the first one made an awful lot of money, it's popular, so let's just get a sequel out of the way. No, this actually felt like the writer, director, and editor actually had an idea for a sequel and said, this is what I want to do, and they did it. And the story is great, albeit a little familiar, it's very Gangs of New York, but I'm a sucker for those kind of stories, those kind of revenge stories where the character decides to take a much more tactful approach by getting close to the enemy rather than just going in guns blazing. And honestly, this is definitely one of the first few movies of the year that I genuinely loved. Number 5 is for a movie that I actually feel kind of bad that I saw it opening weekend, but I didn't bring you guys a review because I didn't figure that you guys would watch it. To be honest, between that and a game review that I think a lot more people would have talked about, I had to go with the game review. I can't remember what I posted that weekend, but it is Gone Girl. David Fincher returns again with a movie that is probably going to be one of the most talked about movies from his filmography, considering how there's certain elements to it that are not very Fincher-esque. Fincher by his dark murder mysteries, like Seven. Fight Club, even though that's more a little bit more satirical, a little bit more darkly comedic, like this movie. But you also got Zodiac, you also got recently The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and this is a movie that mixes elements from Fight Club along with The Social Network. Actually, The Social Network, it has certain things that have to do with the media, because it's definitely one of those movies that is an instant conversation starter. Alright, you go up to any friend who has watched this movie, who's a big Fincher fan, and you guys can practically spend the next couple of hours debating this movie, because there's just so many facets to it. It starts off as a, did he do it or did he not do it? And then later on it tackles the media and how the media manipulates certain things into leading you astray and making you believe that this is what's going on, when in reality there's just more sides to the story. And it's a little daunting to know that there's actually a twist in the movie that happens actually in the middle rather than later on at the end. But I'm almost actually kind of glad that it happens halfway through the movie, because after that it becomes even more and more fascinating, trying to figure out, okay, what's gonna happen next. And I'm not going to spoil it because I know that some people have been wanting to watch this movie for a while. But this is definitely one of the movies that left me walking out of the theater going, holy shit. And one of the interesting things about it is that it's actually funnier than what you probably make it out to be based on some of the trailers and stuff that you've seen about it. Because it has certain moments that are unintentionally funny. Now, when you hear the phrase unintentionally funny, you think of a movie that has bad writing or bad acting or bad directing, and because of that, it becomes laughable. This is, no, the writing is top-notch, the directing is great by Fincher, and the acting is amazing. Rosamund Pike is definitely getting nominated for an Oscar. But the reason why I say it's unintentionally funny is because it captures certain darkly comedic moments so well in a very realistic fashion that it's like when you read a really bizarre yet kind of macabre story on the newspaper. And who reads newspaper these days? When you read it online saying, you know, something happened. I'm sorry, I'm using a very stereotypical state here, but Florida. Something crazy happened in Florida where certain people got killed. Like the story for Pain and Gain. You look at it, it involves death, it involves criminal behavior, but you laugh at it because of how, like wow, did this just happen? And that's the case with Gone Girl. Definitely one of the movies that I highly recommend you check out before certain people spoil it for you online, because that's been happening quite recently. Alright, we're getting to some of the finer movies of this year that I genuinely loved and would love to watch again and again. Yeah! You know, I was trying to find a better image for this movie, but this is all I could come across that was displayed in a very wallpaper-like fashion. But it's definitely effective, and that is Birdman. My God, when I finished this movie and I was walking out, man, I said to myself, I want to watch it again, and I knew that that's where it needed to rank high. Birdman is definitely one of the most transcendent experience. I'm sorry to sound very artsy here, but one of the more transcendent experiences in the theater that I had in quite some time, where I'm just mesmerized. And definitely one of the most talked about movies of the year. Definitely a comeback performance by Michael Keaton, who's definitely gonna get nominated. And this fantastic cast with Zach Galifianakis. I mean, you usually know him by comedic roles like in The Hangover or whatever, but here he has certain comedic aspects to his character, but this is definitely his best performance ever in his acting career, because he just nails it. And Edward Norton is amazing. Andrea Riseborough, I think her character didn't get a lot of screen time, but she was also good. Amy Ryan, Emma Stone. All right, I love Emma Stone. She's one of my wives, but unbiased, I will say that her performance is great as well. And Naomi Watts, they all do an amazing job. And the director, Alejandro González Iñárritu, who decided to take the film and make it seem like it's all one big take, is definitely extraordinary. It's very familiar to another filmmaker who achieved a major landmark filmmaking technique just recently with a movie that he released this year. And I will go ahead and talk about it briefly in my honorable mentions, but this is definitely one of the movies, one of the best directed movies of the year. Sure, it's not all one take, obviously, because it actually takes place during the span of a few days. So there's a couple of transitions where you know, yeah, this is definitely they definitely used visual effects to be able to make a transition from this day to another, but still make it seem like it's all one long shot. But still, it's done in such a masterful way where everybody knew they needed to bring their A game to the table, and not only the directing and the acting, but also the writing. And I love the writing because it tackles so many things that I could take up like 20 minutes in this video talking about, from the media to filmmaking to careers to the satirical nature of having Michael Keaton, who used to play Batman, playing a character who used to play a comic book superhero named Birdman, and now he's a washed-up actor. It's so self-aware, but in a very social, in such a social commentary kind of way that it's definitely, like Gone Girl, one of the movies that if you know somebody else who saw this movie, definitely spend a good time with them talking about it, and you will look at the movie almost in a completely different way. Oh, come on! I had a feeling that you knew that this movie was going to be really, really high on my top 10 list. Yes, it is Guardians of the Galaxy coming in at number 3. I love this movie. I mean, I've already reviewed it, so go check it out. to know why it is that I loved it. But definitely one of the best Marvel movies and one of the best films of the year. Not only because it made a shitload of money, but also because it just did something that we weren't expecting, and for good reasons, because didn't know who the hell the Guardians of the Galaxy were until we saw the movie, and now I know who Star-Lord is. I know who Groot is, Rocket. They all had great chemistry, great performances by all the actors playing them, great action, great comedy, and even quite a decent amount of heart to bring it all together. Alright, well, if you watch my reviews, you already know by now which movies are going to end up as my number 2 and number 1. But let's go ahead and get out of the way. Number 2 is, of course, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the movie that I define as the Empire Strikes Back of the Marvel Universe, where just everything changed. Not only for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but what I also like to call the MTU, the Marvel Television Universe, because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was changed into a marvelous show because of this movie. Alright? Now, I'm not going to say that I give all the credit to the writers of just this movie, because it's kind of safe to say that everybody gets in some kind of secret bunker. Joss Sweet and Kevin Feige, or Feige, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, and the writers of every Phase 2 or Phase 3 movie that's coming out in the next few years, to actually talk to one another and be like, okay, this is the direction that all these movies that we have the rights to are going to take. And I think they made the right choice with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, making the Cap badass again, because from what I hear, an awful lot of people didn't really care for the first Avenger. I liked it a lot, but I don't think it would have been on my top 10 like Winter Soldier did, because it just changed everything. And what more can I really say about this movie, other than the fact that you should check out my review if you do, in fact, want to know more. Alright, so before I get to my number 1 favorite movie of 2014, let's go ahead and briefly talk about some honorable mentions. I know this video is already running kind of long, but let's just do this real quick. Snowpiercer, okay? I thought that this movie was really, really good. One of the finer action movies. It's, once again, somewhat of a foreign movie. I mean, it has American actors like Chris Evans, was it John Hurt? No, yeah, John Hurt. Yeah, it is John Hurt. John Hurt, Jamie Bell, and Tilda Swinton. But it's actually a Korean-made movie. And I love how they were actually able to blend styles from both the Western style of filmmaking and the Eastern. And it's definitely a very captivating film. And actually kind of original, well, somewhat original, because nothing is original these days. But Snowpiercer is definitely one of the more refreshing movies to come out this year. Also, some other honorable mentions. 22 Jump Street. I know that it's a bit of a rehash of the first one, but it excuses itself by saying that it knows that it's a rehash of the first one. I just hope they don't do it again, because it's funny the first time. I hope they don't do it with 23 Jump Street, because we know there's going to be a 23 Jump Street. But I said to myself, if it's funny, if it has me laughing out loud, I'll forgive it. And sure enough, it had me in stitches a couple of times. And it had great chemistry, once again, between Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum. And definitely one of the most entertaining and funny movies of the year. Mockingjay Part 1, definitely a great setup to what's to come in the Hunger Games saga. I believe that's it. Oh, and finally, another movie that I just recently watched, which was that other movie that everybody was talking about because of how it was filmed. Boyhood. It's a movie that was filmed in literally 12 years. Which, I'm not gonna lie, is actually a thought that I had some time ago. I don't know, like a few years back. I said to myself, wouldn't it be kind of strange or kind of crazy if somebody were to film a movie with the same actors over a period of time? I wonder if I'll be able to do that. And then freaking Richard Linklater releases his movie this year that he actually technically started in 2002, so technically he came up with the idea first. But whatever. Anyways, I definitely give this movie an honorable mention for the landmark filmmaking, the great performances, and the fact that it actually made me think about my childhood and how simple things were back then, reflecting how our main character started at the beginning of the movie to him leaving for college at the end. The only thing that kept, honest to God, this movie would have been in my top 10 if it wasn't for the story, which I think it's a little bit light. There's nothing too fascinating with the story, because it's actually kind of simple. You kind of take away the performances and the landmark technique of filming this over 12 years, and you got a pretty standard coming-of-age story. So that's what kept it from my top 10. And that is about it. So let's go ahead and roll that little transition and reveal my favorite number 1 movie of 2014. And it is Transformers Age of Extinction. It's the Lego movie. Yeah, it's the Lego movie. Alright, long story short, I saw this movie 4 times. There's no other way to explain it. I saw this movie 4 times, and each time I laughed. Each time I felt like crying. Each time I was made to feel like I was a kid again. And it's very rare for movies to do nowadays, considering how analytical I am of them. You know, I dissect them. I pick apart everything. And for a movie like this to make me forget all of that, especially the first time I saw it in the theater, it's an experience that I dare say I couldn't replicate with any other movie on this list. So it is the Lego movie, and if you guys want to know more, definitely check out my review that I did at the beginning of this year during its time of its release. I'll put the annotation somewhere here. But my number 1 favorite movie of 2014 was the Lego movie. So rest assured, I am looking forward to the sequel in complete anticipation. And that's it for my top 10 movies of 2014. I'm going to throw my notebook out of the way because I am done. Okay, now that this is up there, I'm not going to think twice about which movie should have made my top 10 or which one I should have cut out. No, I'm done. Okay, it's out there. That's my top 10. Thank you guys for watching. Now I ask you, what were you guys' favorite movies of 2014? Post your top 10 list in the comments if you like. And I don't really believe I'll be doing a top 10 worst movies of 2014 because, like I said, I didn't watch that many movies. Alright, I checked out mainly the ones that everybody was talking about, and whether or not I agreed with them was left up to me. Alright, there were a few movies that people were critically praising, and I looked at, and then I went to go watch them, and I was like, you know, it was good, but not making my top 10. You know, I'm very sad to say that a couple of those movies included The Hobbit: Battle of Five Armies, and the movie that was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and as great as it was great, didn't make the cut, not even my honorable mentions, which was Interstellar. And I'm kind of bummed that that was the case, but I gotta go with my gut, and my gut went with these movies. So now let me know what your guys' favorite movies of the year were, and go ahead and even tell me which movies you thought were total shit this year, alright? Your worst movie, your top 10 worst movies of 2014. So thank you guys for watching, and let's hope for another great year of movies in 2015 with Avengers and Star Wars coming back after literally a 10-year... Okay. 10 years since the last actual Star Wars movie, 32 years since the last great Star Wars movie. Let's go ahead and put it that way. So once again, I thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys at the movies.